Pearson had a reputation for shooting from the hip. At least two presidents, Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry Truman, had publicly accused him of being a chronic liar. But when it came to that particular allegation, nothing came close to matching the extravagance of a Tennessee senator named Kenneth McKellar. In a speech on the Senate floor, McKellar denounced Pearson as an ignorant liar, a pusillanimous liar, a peewee liar, a liar during his manhood, a liar by profession, a liar in the daytime, and a liar in the nighttime. In our interview, I naturally asked Pearson if any of those pungent adjectives accurately described him, and he naturally denied that he was any kind of liar. We then talked about politics and the next presidential election. The two of us shared the conventional wisdom that Richard Nixon was the probable Republican nominee, and when we turned our attention to who was likely to oppose him in the general election, I noted that the Democratic glamour boy would seem to be Senator Jack Kennedy. Although I didn't know the senator from Massachusetts well, I felt a certain kinship with him because we shared a common background. As boys growing up in the Boston suburb of Brookline, Jack Kennedy and I had lived in the same neighborhood. Over the years, I have often described the Brookline of my youth as an O'Connor and Goldberg town, and our two families exemplified that. I was the fourth and last child of Frank and Zina Wallace, both of whom were Jewish immigrants who came to America from the shtetls of Tsarist Russia in the late 19th century, some 4 decades after Kennedy's forebears emigrated from Ireland. My father eventually became a successful insurance broker, and by the time I was born in 1918, our family was settled in Brookline, which had become a haven for upwardly mobile Jews and Catholics who were still not welcome in the snootier sections around Boston, a city then notorious for its class-conscious snobbery. Joseph and Rose Kennedy moved to Brookline shortly after they were married in 1914 and began raising their large family just a block or so away from our home on Osborne Road. Jack Kennedy was 1 year older than I was, and we attended the same neighborhood school. Even though Jack Kennedy and I were about the same age and lived in the same neighborhood and attended the same elementary school, our paths seldom crossed during the years he lived in Brookline. I'm sure that in time I would have gotten to know him better if he hadn't moved away. After Joseph Kennedy made his fortune as an investment banker and in other enterprises, he began to set his sights on greener pastures, and in 1927, when Jack was 10, I was 9, the Kennedys relocated to Riverdale, then a posh and exclusive section of New York City. From there, Jack Kennedy went on to his impressive achievements, which included heroism in the Pacific during World War II, then election to Congress in 1946 and to the Senate 6 years later. His political star then rose so rapidly that by 1957 he was on the short list of Democratic contenders for the White House. Which brings me back to my interview with Drew Pearson in December of that year.
He's the only man in history that I know who won a Pulitzer Prize on a book which was ghostwritten for him, which indicates the kind of public relations build-up he's had.
Who wrote the book for him?
I don't recall at the present moment.
You know for a fact, yes, Drew, that the book,
I do know.
Profiles in Courage, was written for Senator Kennedy by somebody else?
I do.
Kennedy's office called the next day and asked for a copy of the transcript. A day or so later, a meeting, to which I was not invited, was held in the executive suite of my boss, Oliver Trays, the president of ABC Television. Among those present were Bobby Kennedy and the esteemed Washington lawyer Clark Clifford, whose honor roll of prestigious clients included the Kennedy family. Their purpose in setting up the meeting with Trays was to get an on-air apology from Pearson and/or me for what had been said in our broadcast about the authorship of Profiles in Courage. In the meantime, I had urged Pearson to specify who had ghostwritten the book. After checking with his sources, he called to tell me it was written by a member of the senator's staff, a young man named Ted Sorensen. A few years later, Sorensen would acquire a certain derivative glory as one of President Kennedy's top advisers and his primary speechwriter. But in 1957, he was unknown to the general public. In the preface to Profiles in Courage, Kennedy credited Sorensen for his invaluable assistance in the assembly and preparation of the material on which the book was based, and that was the extent of his acknowledgment. Pearson refused to make the desired apology, and so did I. But the network brass failed to back us up.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.